All right, man. Everything looked good for you on the topics?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like it's like I've only been like using the quadrants for like not even a whole year now, but
Mm-hmm.
like and I'll be upfront and honest with it. Like it's still a work in progress trying to be able to communicate that with our coaches. And
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think this whole COVID thing is going to help us a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see.
Cool. All right. Yeah, we'll just dive into it then. See where it takes us. I'm kind of very conversational like that. So, all
Yeah.
right. Brijesh, thanks a lot, man, for coming onto the show. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's late for you as well, so we'll try to make this thing as quick as possible, but try to get the people some information on some stuff. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Jack, thanks for having me on. I look forward to speaking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know what we had talked about originally. I know you had downloaded and read my quadrant training book, and um, for me, it's all been very conceptual. I haven't done a lot of like actual practical application of it yet. And I know you had said you had, so I was wondering if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing what your last year has been like using that, and just maybe giving a brief overview of what you're doing for the listeners.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little bit about how this all kind of started. So I'm not sure if you're aware, the NCAA last summer put out a paper called, it was on catastrophic injuries and sudden deaths is what the name of the paper was called. And it was put out by the Sports Science Institute. And basically a lot of it came about from the football issue at Maryland and the deaths that they had there. And so what started to happen is the NCAA said that we need to have a little bit more constraints on top of training and coaches and strength conditioning coaches and practices, and specifically football and heat acclimatization and all these types of things. And so they put down some guidelines and some standards, and the NSCA and the CSCCA followed suit and basically put out recommended guidelines on how to return from activity. If you've got a new coach, if you've got somebody coming back from rhabdo, if you've got somebody coming back from an injury, and if you've got student athletes coming back from long layoffs. So what we did is we got the idea from Daniel Bove, actually put it out with the Suns, and that's where I first saw it when I say it, like the quadrant type methodology. And I love the concept of intensity and stress and balancing it out, because we've looked at different types of technology to be able to use with our coaches and student athletes about, like, you know, how to track their RPEs and some subjective training load scores. And, you know, it's been a hit or miss, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's like running kids down and chasing them down to make sure that they input what they're supposed to input or give us the feedback they were supposed to get. And we as coaches try to relay that information back to our sport coaches that we work with. So after this paper came out and the recommendations came out, and I learned the quadrants from Daniel Bove, I said, you know what, like, to our staff, we need to be able to speak this language, because I think it's really simple and it's really easy for us to be able to impress upon our coaches on how to communicate. Or if we ask, like, hey coach, what's today going to look like? Or what's this week going to look like? When we broke it down to him, we basically said, is there going to be a high day or a low day? That's really all you need to tell us. And I told them, listen, like, we always want to have a fairly high intensity, because we want to be able to replicate our skills at game-like speeds, right? And so that's we always said we want to make sure that we're going at a high intensity in terms of practice. The biggest thing I try to get through to them is listen, the biggest indicator in injuries or kind of any kind of overreaching or overtraining is going to be volume. If we can have a good handle on what our volume is going to be, that's going to help us stay a little bit healthier, and it's going to allow us to be able to plan to be our best throughout the season.
No, I think that's great. And so in implementing it, I think the biggest thing you even said was the simple language that it allows us to relate back to sport coaches. I know myself, like, I can get caught up in the weeds very easily. So it really kind of simplified things for me when communicating with just various people that I work with that have other training loads going on outside of like my physical training for them. And I was just wondering, so how did it go in the first year? What can you work on? Like, just kind of give me an overview of like how you think it went.
Yeah. Can I share my screen? Does that pop up for you?
Hold on. Let me give you permission. I can do that. Give me a sec. Yeah,
Just
go
to
ahead.
share.
Go ahead. Yep.
So there's a couple things that I think may help clarify things just a little bit. And so first is what we really try to impress upon our student athletes is RPE. Like just tell us, like, you know, how hard do you think today was? And so I try to get through to our coaches, like, listen, like this is going to give us some very valuable information. You may, when you design practice, you may think it's going to be easy day or a moderate day, but the kids might think it's like really hard, you know, and that's going to factor into what we do tomorrow. And that's going to factor into the next day. And just getting them to understand about the concept of cumulative fatigue and the cumulative stress, I think is a tough one for most sport coaches to understand, because most of them have never had any kind of classical education in terms of periodization and planning and exercise physiology and understanding stressors. You know, they're experts in their sports and specifically in the tactical and technical realm. They don't really have any kind of education in regards to the physical realm. So that's what I really try to get through to them. And so we at Quinnipiac have kind of made this a simple RPE scale. Like, I'm not a big fan of like 1 to 10 because how do you differentiate between 7 and 8? You know what I mean? So you really don't. So a simple scale for us was 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 is going to be very hard. 4 is hard. 3 is average. 2 is light, and 1's easy. You know, and this is the language we use in the weight room. Like, it'll say, all right, we're going to do tempo runs today, and it should be around a 3. You know what I mean? Or we're going to do today's heavy set on squat or trap bar bench should be a 3. It should be moderately hard, but you should get all the reps. It shouldn't be too bad. Maybe in the next week, it's going to be like a 4. And the last week, I want you to go to a 5. You know, so we speak that language within the weight room, and all we try to do is try to speak that same language to our coaches. And so we basically use those colors and kind of mapped it onto this kind of quadrant where volume is our y-axis and then intensity is our x-axis. And the quadrants I use are a little bit different than yours, numbered wise. We just go 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're really looking at, 3 and 4 is going to be higher on the neural end. And we're just going to look at, different tissue stress, whether it be high or low. And then 1 and 2 is going to be a little bit lower on the intensity side. And then we're just going to look at volume on that side. So what we try to really get them to understand is, listen, like, most of your practices should be in the 3s and 4s, but you can't live in 4 all the time. If we know we're going to play 2 or 3 games this week, or we get, like basketball, for example, we got to play 3 games in 8 days, and we know those games are going to be 4s. Let's manage the other days so we know where we are, so we can be our best for those games. You know, it's a concept like Fergus Connolly likes to say in tactical periodization is almost like reverse engineering the game. Like, we want to know where we have our games and then kind of work backwards in terms of how we're going to program loads and how we're going to be able to program or prescribe practice. And like, I don't get involved in writing up a practice plan, but from a kind of like a stress manager's perspective, I'll often ask our coach, like, what do you think you're going to do today? Is it going to be high or is it going to be a low day? And they'll be like, oh, I'm going to go medium or low today. I'm like, okay. You know, and we might not even train that day within the weight room, but at least I'll have an idea of where they're going to be, you know? And so for us, we've been able to use some of this language, I think, coming after this coronavirus and COVID situation where we haven't seen our student athletes for a long time. I think it's going to be even more important that we can communicate the same language just a little bit more. And like, I'm not married to this. Like, if a coach has, like, some of our programs are really good with monitoring load and understanding how to program and plan practice. Like, it's not something we're going to hold them to because they might have a system that works better for them. And even for me, like, we're still learning how to implement this system across a variety of different sports. And, everybody's got their own ways and the way they do things, but we just want to make sure that can we do things just a little bit better for the best interest of the student athletes that we get to work with.
And in the least, even if you have teams that might not be as receptive to this, for you, it gives you and your staff kind of a cohesive look at what you can do in a weight room while talking to the coach in their language, right? You can relate it back, translate it back into the quadrant language, and figure out what you need to do in terms of your own training intensities and volumes in cohesion with the sport, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah. And I think that's the best thing, is just getting everybody on the same page and be able to speak similar languages so we know where everybody's coming from, because it's not about me and it's not about the coach. It's not about whoever else is involved. It's about us being our best so we can give the best program to the student athlete.
In season, how do you, so like I've thought about this a ton, and again, this is where I haven't been able to practically apply it since I wrote it, but in season, how do you feel about, for example, for me, it's a quadrant II. I'm trying to think for you. I think it's a quadrant IV. So like your high volume, high intensity days, are those ever happening in season from a physical training, like strength and conditioning side, or are you never really touching that kind of?
No.
Yeah.
So in season, my philosophy is kind of do the opposite of the sport. And so in sport, it tends to be, so we'll talk about sport, it tends to be high volume, low load because they're only using your body weight. And that tends to be short amplitude, meaning that they do their movements through a really small range of motion. So what we try to do in the weight room is balance that out. So we're going to do lower volume, higher loads, and higher range of motion, higher amplitude movements. So try to maintain a mobility and range of motion as much as we can, because one thing I've noticed over the course of the season is student athletes and athletes in general lose range of motion throughout the season. So we want to make sure, because like our number one priority is health and keeping them healthy. So mobility is a big thing that we want to make sure that they have throughout the season, so that they have accessible range of motion and they have control over it. So that's the way we look at things. So we'll never do a quadrant 4-day in the off season unless we're working with a redshirt, transfer, or anybody who's working back to a return to play situation. So anybody that's healthy, that's in the lineup, that's going through regular practice, they'll probably never do quadrant 4 activities because they're going to get that when they play. So for us, it'll be primarily 1 and 3, so low volume. So we're going to live in low volume. So it might be recovery and regeneration, or some light, maybe flush work, bodybuilding methods, you know what I mean? Like concentric work, or we might do some higher load type activities, but really low volume.
Well, so when I look at these, and that's kind of how I've thought about it too, but when I look at the higher loads, lower volume, for example, I almost see that as like a primer to start my week. Like, I'm not sure. I remember you were showing me some stuff where you were a few days out from competition, and I know you're probably layering that in there. So I almost see that like as a primer day. And then you go over to the other side of things and you talk about like this regeneration, not a straight day where you do nothing but foam roll, but a day where you get maybe some sort of low level body weight circuit, or like you said, some bodybuilding type stuff where we get a little bit of volume, but absolutely zero intensity out of it for the most part. Like, are you seeing that as something you can use to prime a player too? Do you see some athletes that like prefer to do that before a game, or is that strictly something you use like post game after like a really high intensity event?
Well, they're a little different, right? So we can do some high neural type stuff for a low amount of volume to prime and potentiate the system. But we can also use some some of the bodybuilding concentric kind of flush type stuff that would live in a quadrant 1 type activity. And that can, that can provide some different benefits. It could be mental, you know what I mean? It's like sometimes like somebody didn't have a good game and they want to do work, but we're going to give them work that's very low eccentric kind of stress in nature. So we're not going to create any kind of soreness, but it's going to make them feel like they did something, which sometimes mentally can benefit them. That's like typically when we'll do like post-workout games with our hockey team, like at their request, I never give them any exercises with a big eccentric component because we just played a game, and it's usually after back-to-back games. So Friday, Saturday at home, like a Saturday game. So it's going to be a lot of things that are just really concentric based to bring blood flow in there. It's actually going to facilitate some recovery. And that's some of the feedback that they've often said, is that they felt better going into a Monday when they do those Saturday night workouts. And then like the quadrant 3 type stuff, that's a little bit more high neural, is really acceleration work, some plyometrics. And we do those the day before a game. We'll do it in the morning of a game. Some guys will do it some guys and or girls will do it right before they start to get dressed. like they go in the locker room. So but the big thing is it's really low volume, right? Because those things like sprints and jumps, I think you can easily overdo, but we've kind of found a really good sweet spot. And I think that's what it all comes down to too, is like, if you look at Prilip and Stable, it's not like you've got high, medium, low in terms of volumes and ideal structures. And I think we kind of live in that optimal world, and we'd rather do less of it than overdo it. You know what I mean? And it's just trying to improve their intermuscular and intermuscular coordination so that they can coordinate, right? And they can recruit some higher threshold motor units before they go do their activity.
Yeah, and I've found that from just personal experience, and then a few people I've like used this on is like you can limit like a quadrant 3 day to something like you pick, like you're gonna do 12 jumps, you pick some jump variation, 12 jumps, like maybe 9 trap bar jumps or 5 10-yard accelerations, and like that's all. And I don't even know, maybe that's even more than you're thinking, but like I found that, yeah, if you err on that lower side, it really primes you pretty well for like whatever the task at hand is, either the next day or the day of.
Yeah, like we often do these things, we call them like neural charge circuits, which are awesome for potentiation. We just do it for time, and we'll never go above 2 or 3 reps. And so we'll usually set it up like in a grouping of 4 exercises. So we'll do some sort of jump. So a double leg jump, it could be like a box jump, it could be a squat jump, whatever it may be. So, a jump or a hop. So it could be like a single leg hop over hurdles or lateral, whatever it may be. Then we'll do some sort of med ball throw for 2 or 3 reps. The jumps are 2 or 3. And then we'll go back and we'll do some sort of bound for 2 to 3 reps. And then we'll do another med ball throw for 2 to 3 reps. And we'll go for like 6 to 10 minutes. We'll put time on the clock. And what you start to notice is sometimes you may feel sluggish, like you're just starting a day or starting a session. You might be a little fatigued. And so what we tell our athletes is literally walk from exercise to exercise. We're just going to go for time. So we're just trying to accumulate as many good quality reps as we can. And we're not doing it for 3 sets or 4 sets or 5 sets. We're just going to do it like maybe you'll get 8 sets. Maybe if you're feeling real good, maybe you'll get like 12 sets. Like it's just really just trying to accumulate volume over the course of that time. Like it's escalating density type work, but really just you're going to auto regulate it based on how you feel. And what starts to happen, and the feedback that we often get, is they start to feel really good and they're just woken up. All we did is just prime their nervous system, but we did it with really low load activities, but a high velocity.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. I think the more I've kind of played around with similar stuff, I found it to be really helpful for myself. So yeah, I like where you're going with that for sure. When we talk about strength decay or something like that, for example, what are you doing? Like, where are you kind of falling along the lines of that? Like, I guess it's good for hockey, especially in college. It feels like you guys have a pretty structured schedule in terms of you're always playing Friday and Saturday. So that makes it a little bit easier than like the pro side of things, for example. Like I've heard Eric Renahan kind of talk about how he's got to squeeze in certain training stimuluses like wherever he can just because of the nature of the beast in the NHL. But for you with the established schedule, do you feel like those are things you can touch on at pretty low volume still at some point during your week?
Yeah, in college hockey, it lends for a really good training schedule. It's kind of like football or lacrosse where you're playing 1 game a week. It's really nice. Like, so we like to make sure we distribute our stress over the course of the week. So we'll often train twice a week, Monday and Wednesday, and then we'll play Friday, Saturday. So Monday tends to be our day. That's going to be a little higher volume in nature. It's going to be a little bit more intensive. We're going to load that day a little bit more. And we'll do two full body training sessions, but that's where we'll get our loading in for the lower body primarily. And then when we get to our Wednesday, it's almost like a potentiation lift. Tends to be a little bit more upper body because our upper body can recover quicker. But we'll do some speed and power activity type stuff that day. And then Thursday, it's not mandatory, but a lot of our guys will come in for our women's team. It is mandatory. We'll do a pre-practice warm-up, which is just what I said. It's just like it's a neural charge. Like we'll warm up, try to get them going. We'll do some loosen up stuff, and then we'll do 6 minutes of a neural charge circuit. We'll put some sprints and accelerations in there too. But for our men's team, we'll often come in on their own, like pre-practice and do some speed work.
Yeah, no, on game days, do you guys do any of that, like neural charge stuff? Do some of the teams like doing that, or have you not really messed with that?
No, we have. Like, sorry, I don't know if I finished, but like, so going back to like the strength decay thing, like what we
Oh
found,
yeah.
I didn't even get to finish that part,
You're good. You're good.
is, is, um, is our kids actually get stronger in season, and that's a concept that I, that I think a lot of people always say is we want to maintain in season. Like sometimes coaches say that too. I'm like, we don't want to maintain. Like if your average is 100, like why the hell would you want to maintain being a 100? Like, why would you not try to get better? And that's kind of like our mentality and our mantra with everything that we do, is really trying to impress upon them. Let's find ways to get better, 1% better each and every single day. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but just find a way to improve, whether it be physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, individually, collectively. Just find a way that you can improve and get better. But we do it in a really smart way that we're not going to trash them for practice. So we're smart with the volume that we prescribe, and we're smart with like trying to balance it around travel schedules. And if we're coming off a road trip or do we play a physical opponent, like we'll adapt and we'll monitor and we'll do those types of things. But what we've noticed is that our strength improves over the course of the year, because I tell our athletes, like, we want to be our fastest and most powerful at the end of the year when they're handing out trophies. It doesn't matter for like that in November and December. Like we need to do that in March and April. So, so what we found is a lot of our kids will test better at the end of the season. And, especially vertical jumps, like some kids will set PRs at the end of the year in playoffs.
So do you think part of that, like I've heard from others that you train your athletes very hard in the off season. Do you think some of that could just be like tapering off the volume in season and having it almost be like a super compensation thing? Or
Oh
do you think
yeah.
it's like, I'm sure it's multifaceted. Do you think it's more primarily like what you're selecting to do in season with them?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get the residual gains from the off season when our off season program ends in August, the following March. Like I don't think that you're going to get that much of a lag. But I do notice that once we do remove some of that stress from the off season, for sure, our athletes can handle a pretty good amount of volume in the early half of the season. And my philosophy, I think, in off season just a little bit different. I think a lot of coaches like to espouse minimal effective dose, and minimum effective dose doesn't cause stress to the system. And the only way the system is going to be able to adapt, or the organism is going to adapt, is going to be able to. You've got to stress the system to cause an adaptation. And in season, I think minimum effective dose and microdosing are great methodologies to be able to use. But in the off season, like that's not, again, depends on your sport. If you're dealing with basketball who's playing year round, then I think that's probably an effective strategy to be able to use. But like for an ice hockey team, football team, lacrosse team, maybe because they're not going to go practice all the time. Like it's hard to get a pickup game of 11 on 11 football or hockey if you don't have access to ice. Like you're just going to train.
That's an amazing point, because basketball is so different in that sense where they're playing all the time, no matter what. And
yeah,
and these other sports, like you said, you're not getting that same kind of load, tactical and technical load in the off season.
No. So you can give a good amount of physical stress. And what I've found is that because I've tried different models, and when we went to a model where we train an hour a day and we try to distribute stress over the course of the year, our athletes didn't feel the same when they got to the season. Whereas when we build up work capacity gradually over the course of the year, and we'll have some of our off-season workouts are 90 minutes, like an hour and 45 minutes, like they're long sessions, but it's not like that every day, but they're long sessions, and just trying to accumulate stress and try to make them feel, excuse me, but sometimes I'll say this week's going to make you feel shitty. Like this is a make you feel shitty week. Like just know next week we're going to back off, but like this week is going to be a grind, and you just got to be able to push through and just know that there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel, but you're not going to feel good this week. And I explain the reason why. But the biggest thing is get them to understand, listen, like we want to get to the season. We can handle going 6 days a week for 2+ hours a day, and it's nothing. Plus go to class and do all these types of things and handle all these stressors, and you're going to be fine. But the only way the human body will be able to adapt to that is you've got to stress the system.
So I find this fascinating because obviously you've been at Quinnipiac for a long time, and you've established, a culture there where I think even people with younger training ages are going to kind of just fall in line with what's the culture is, I think, and testament to you guys for setting that up. But let's say you're in a situation that's maybe not, maybe even when you first got to Quinnipiac or something like that, where you want to impose all this stress, but you just don't have people that are either maybe great movers, they don't train well in the gym, they're not used to training the way that you want them to train. Like, how do you feel you can get them to that point where when it's time to perform in the gym, they can perform at a high level and you don't have to worry about, you know, any health concerns or anything like that, if that makes sense?
Well, it takes time, like that's the same thing with our freshmen who come in or first years who come into their program. We don't give them the same program that our upperclassmen or our veterans do. Like they just will not be able to handle it. Like they're cooked after a warm up. Like, and so they're not going to be able to tolerate the same kind of load because they don't have the same work capacity. And so work capacity is something that improves month to month and year to year, and to compare a work capacity of a incoming freshman at 18 to 20 years old to a senior who's 21 to 23, 24 years old sometimes with some of our males, like it's not even close, and so we don't expect them to be able to do the same amount of work. So their program is going to be tailored just a little bit different. And like their first, 3 weeks to 4 weeks of their training program is probably closer to 45 to 50 minutes, which is what maybe like a early off season type session might look like, or some maybe early in season session might look like as well. And then we'll just gradually increase volume by just giving them a little bit more volume and by adding components to their program and slowly try to build their work capacity over the course of time to the point where they can handle in season, and that's one thing we've kind of really recognized is the kids who wind up with like any kind of like soft tissue stuff at the beginning of the season, it tends to always be first years and freshmen because they can't handle the basically the stress of skating, at the pace at which we skate.
So, to change the subject just a little bit on this, we were talking about neural priming too, and I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit on RPR as well. I know you've used it extensively. I took the level 1 course. I've used it a fair bit myself. Two things I've noticed in the year and a half that I've been using it, and I'm not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but do you see diminishing returns on the use of RPR for people in terms of like reaching a performance state, quote unquote, when it is utilized? Or do you think that the reason it might not feel quite so effective over time is just because the patterns that you're kind of putting in there are like starting to just become ingrained within the person? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think your second response I think is probably a little bit more accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that it wears off because they're points, right? And so like I've dug deep into this, and I don't know if you've talked to Joe about this too, but like when he was at Quinnipiac, like we dug deep into this, and we'd research and we'd find different things, and RPR. I don't know why they don't really tell you this, but really it's a combination of neurolymphatic points, neurovascular points, acupuncture points, fascial points, trigger points, and it's combined into a system that's reproducible and that can give you a lot of information, especially when you get to like some level two stuff and you start to peel back layers and where people might be compensating from. And that's really what it is. And they tell you this too, is the human body is meant to breathe and meant to move. And we can get really good at compensating how we breathe, and we can get really good at compensating how we move. It doesn't mean that we're going to move in the most efficient ways all the time throughout life. We want to, but our body and our brains will ultimately figure out a different path if we're not doing it the right way. If our lymph isn't moving the right way, it can easily create congestion, which is going to affect and alter your fascia, which is going to affect and alter your gait. So there's lots of different things that are going to start to happen here. And a lot of it really comes down to stress and how you handle stress. You could have gotten a reset and you could have been feeling great, and you drive in a car, and if somebody cuts you off and you're stressed about it and how you handle that, you can get completely thrown off. Like your firing patterns could be completely thrown off. Like you could have been great, right? You could have been like, for us, like we're about to go into playoffs, for our hockey team, and we were ready and we were peaking at the right time, and coronavirus happens and everything ends, and what we really try to get across to them is like, listen, like this, a lot of this stuff's out of your control. The things that you can control are, number one, establish your routine, right? Because we're creatures of habit. So we've got to be able to make sure we establish our routine as quickly as we can when we're at home. 2, we need to be able to stay positive. 3, we need to be able to connect with our team. And then 4, we've got to enjoy the time that we have with our family, because we might not get that time back, right? And so just making really good use of that time. So when we talk about stress and really be able to control your mind state, it's about focusing on the controllables and really getting you to understand how you can control that. And a lot of that comes with your breath work too, because by breathing, you can really focus in on the present moment, right? When you take some deep diaphragmatic breaths, but really are engaged and aware when you breathe, like everything else kind of clears itself. It's funny how that works, but like it brings you back to the present moment. And sometimes we often, like when our stress levels are the highest, it's when we have anxiety or we're anxious over what might happen, right? Or we're stressed or pissed off of like what happened in the past, like 5 minutes ago. When in reality, like you can't do anything about that. Like just try to stay focused on the present moment as much as you can. And this is a little kumbaya-ish, and I don't think it's off topic, but it's just getting you to understand that your mindset is what helps control everything in your body. You know, and RPR, this is the way I look at it, is just a tool that allows you to get centered. It allows you to stay present focused, right? And because a psychologist will do this too, is like if you have somebody that's like anxious or they have anxiety, like a lot of psychologists will tell them, breathe and feel your feet, right? Breathe deep and feel your feet. Because what does feeling your feet do? That you get grounded. When you're grounded, like you're in the present moment. And then sometimes they might do this, is like they'll tell you to rub your arms and rub your face and do all that stuff. What is that? That's just increasing your sense of feel. It's afferent input, right? It's just sensory feedback. Because another thing that starts to happen is when you get anxious and your mind starts spinning out of control, your visual field is going to narrow, and then you lose your sense of feel. You know, when a human beings, like we've got to have sensory input, because then that's going to coordinate our movement. So RPR is really a massive sensory input driver, if you break it down from a neural standpoint. And I think it allows us to stay present focused. So that's why breathing's part of it too.
So you're telling me I probably shouldn't have been playing around with this initially when I was running Mass 1 for the second time, right?
Oh man. Talk about Mass 1. Like that's a massive stressor.
Yeah, dude, I had a training partner the second time I did it. And like the first time I didn't really like keep track of volumes. And then I, see Pat talking about tracking volumes. And I was like, I want to break 60K on that phase 2. And I broke it on the second to last workout. I was just a wreck the rest of the program though. Like that workout just ended me. So.
I felt like my quads were going to rip off. Yeah. Like I think I was in phase 2 or I was like, there's no way I can continue to do this. Yeah. I don't know how it's possible. Like, well, granted, I have 2 kids too, so those are other stressors. But it's just
yeah, dude. I the only reason I was able to do it was like last summer was a time in my life where I had minimal work. Like I lived by myself, single, had my own apartment. Like the conditions were perfect to do it. Otherwise, like I would have never finished it. It was bad. So.
My training's not like that.
No. Well, and that's the thing, like that was when I'd been utilizing it like a month before, and I was like, oh, this is great. And then as time went on, like I was still using it while I was doing mass, but I mean, you're just getting bludgeoned every day so hard. I don't think it, you know what I'm saying? It's like one of those things like you're just talking about, like it was impossible at some point to center everything back in and actually feel like something was, anything was going to help you, Well,
I mean, the other thing in mass too is you're completely getting sagittalized. Like that's all you're doing. You know what I mean? So you're limiting your sense of feel even more.
The variability is gone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. No, that's really interesting stuff on RPR. And I'm glad you put it that way. That even gave me some perspective on why I might've been thinking that way for myself. So, no, I appreciate that. The other quick hitters I wanted to ask you about, the one was UCAN, which Joe told me to ask you about. And I looked it up. I'm like, what is this? So I really kind of wanted you to kind of just take me into your thoughts on that and what you know about it.
So I know a good amount on it. Like I've used UCAN since 2009, I think is the first time. It was a brand new company. And for us, it's right in our backyard in Woodbridge, Connecticut. And the way I got it exposed to it is one of our hockey coaches gave me the packet because they were at their hockey coaches convention, and they said, here's the packet. They told me to give it to our strength coach, and so here it is. And so I got on the phone with them. They kind of talked me through their science and talked me through everything. And basically their carbohydrate is they call it super starch. And it's a different type of starch because we know when we take a starch, it creates an insulin response. This kind of starch has a minimal impact on insulin. So therefore, if it has a minimal impact on insulin, allows our blood sugar to stay that much more stable, right? Because what starts to happen is if we take in a starch, our insulin is going to go up, and then our blood glucose is going to go down, and then we have to take more sugar or more of a starch in, and we're going to get this kind of bouncing and yo-yo type effect, which is something that we want to avoid when we're competing, right? When we're exercising, right? We want to maintain a stable blood sugar, and that's going to do a lot of things. Number one, it's going to allow us to keep our focus and keep our energy and keep our mind on the task at hand. But the second thing that is really important, it's going to allow us to utilize fat as a fuel source. And if we can better utilize fat as a fuel source, because when our blood sugar is stable, we can use glucagon to break down fat. Like we can break down fat. We can go through lipolysis, all those types of things. But we're going to be able to yield so much more energy from the breakdown of fat than we are to rely on stored glycogen. And if we're utilizing fat more as a fuel source to create ATP, then we can spare that glycogen for when we need it the most, which maybe for hockey, in our instance, might be the third period or the second day of a back-to-back game, And so it kind of matched how we wanted to train, which is really to enhance their aerobic energy system to be able to perform work. And so it's a nutritional product that kind of helps us from a physiology standpoint from how we train too. Because when we train, we want to maximize our aerobic system, right? We want to maximize mitochondria. We want to make sure that we can create a ton of energy via aerobic means so that we can spare glycolysis as much as we can spare glycogen as much as we can, and we need it when we need it. So UCAN's a really good product, and we've used it for years on years. The way we introduced it is we said, all right, you use this for 3 days in a row before we train, and then you're not going to use it for the next 3 days that we train. And you tell me the feedback that you feel. And it was instantaneous. They're like, oh my God. They're like, when we took it, like we didn't get tired at all. Like they were able to accumulate so much more work.
That is
it is crazy. It is crazy. And so like, it's different, right? Because it's not a Gatorade, right? And they don't market a ton, and they've got a really feel good story.
The story was interesting. Yeah. With the kid that couldn't break down, what was it? Glycogen. Like that's crazy. Yeah. Glycogen stories. That's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and his dad, the owner, is actually my son's orthodontist too.
Oh, cool.
But like, yeah, it's really good family, really good people that run the business. The product is exceptional. Like if you really look into the science of it, it really makes a lot of sense. And like it's the anti-Gatorade, right? And so I don't know if you're going to send this to Gatorade at all, but like I'm not a,
it's one of our sponsors actually. How dare you? Yeah.
Like Gatorade is just straight sugar. Right. And so the way I try to tell our student athletes is like, listen, if we're going to invest in something, let's invest in something that's actually going to make you better. Like if you want to go have sugar, go have sugar. Like that's something we're not going to invest in. This is a performance product that can really help you, and you've got to get past the starchiness and sometimes the taste of it. Because they expect it to taste like a milkshake, or they expect it to taste like super sweet, and it's not super sweet. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to help your performance.
Can you get it as a bar or a drink or both?
So when we first started, all they had was shakes and powder. Okay. And so now they have bars, which are really good. They have vegan options. They make electrolytes, which are really good too. It's a little bit higher in magnesium than some other products too, which is nice. But I think the best thing that they do, they have a plain super starch. And so what I've told some of our students, just mix the electrolytes into the starch so it gives you the flavor. So it's a little bit less chalky than if you've had a flavored product.
This is cool, man. So it sounds to me like, we talked about RPR, quadrant system, all this stuff. It sounds like you are, and I love the mindset, you're enlarging the solution space for both an athlete's mind and body to accomplish a task. Like there's a ton of variability being put in here, like even on like a physiological level with what you're talking about with like these superstarches being able to use fat and whatnot.
That's a good way to put it. I don't think like I just think it's all like connected, right? Like
Yeah, totally.
it's the old kind of like, I'm Indian and Asian, and so like I think that's the way like I was taught to think is like everything is connected. Like whatever lives in your mind lives in your body, and vice versa. And it's different than a Western approach, which is very reductionist and it breaks everything down. Like it's very holistic. My kind of philosophy and thought process is very holistic, and I try to get our student athletes and the people that I'm fortunate enough to work with to get them to understand like, hey, listen, how you think is going to impact how you feel. Right. And so you better be aware of that, be aware of how you think, because if you're negative and you're pissed off at the world, like don't expect to have a great training session, or wonder why your sleep sucks. Like it's all interrelated, or you worry about the depth of your relationships. Like it matters. Like, like it's so I always go after trying to make better human beings. And as a result, we'll probably make better athletes.
Yeah. I love that you said that too. I never thought about the cultural difference from like, the culture I grew up in and like the culture you grew up in, for example. Like, I feel like in the last few years, I've really started to shift towards a lot of the stuff you're talking about from a global perspective, but I have to fight like what I grew up knowing every day, like knowing that, oh, there's got to be a direct answer to this that correlates specifically to what I'm doing. And it's crazy to even think that like, you have a totally different mindset that's just so much more powerful.
Yeah, thank you. But it
Yeah.
is sometimes like I don't need an answer. Like if I know it works and if it helps, like let's do it.
Yeah.
And it's not going to cause harm. Like that's why like when I was first shown RPR, it was because so-called be activated then. I was like, oh my God, like we got to do this right now. Like right now, like we got to start implementing it. We got to try it. We'll see if it works. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't fine. Like same thing with PRI. Like I've gone down those rabbit holes and I've tried to implement in the team setting, and it's really hard to. And if somebody's figured out how to do it in a team setting, please let me know. But in reality, like it's a good thing for me to know. It gives me a different lens to be able to look at movement. And in individual cases, I can help athletes who might need some of those interventions and some of those exercises. But it's like that's really like anything that I learn and that I see, I'll try. And I don't need, and I'll kind of figure out the answers as I go. Whereas some people be like, they won't implement anything until they know all the answers. I'm like, you're just gonna freaking waste time. Like
you're never gonna get to that point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just try it. Just try it. Like, don't be afraid to try it. Like this is one that I try to teach my interns this all the time. Like, if you think of something, all right, then try it. Go do it. Like I remember one of my interns, assistants, he's at Monmouth now, Jamie. He would have all these thoughts, and I'm like, dude, like you need to do it. Like, stop thinking about it without doing it. Otherwise, you're just going to be like, go do research if that's what you're going to do. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to be a coach, then you've got to, if you think about something and then go figure it out, put it down on paper and make it happen.
Yeah. And that's something I think that's another thing I've started doing a lot more, is just playing around with things and in the weight room, or sprinting's been a huge one for me recently. Like I've just really gone deep down that rabbit hole and it's been awesome. But I think sometimes and this is something I knew, this is kind of, I think the last hurdle for me in like this holistic mindset, not giving a shit like about the rigid constructs of people that I might be around that might be peers or superiors or anything like that, because I mean, in the past, like I've kind of tended to just think reductionist, do what they tell me to do and stay in my box. And now that I'm outside of that box, I'm happy to be out there, but I'm also tentative sometimes to share that with people, or to push it forward. And I think that's kind of the last step for me.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes a leap of faith a little bit, and it takes some humility, and it takes some understanding of where you are. And sometimes you're in a system where you need to be able to stay in the box, and maybe your growth isn't fostered, which is unfortunate. But sometimes those kind of situations do arise. And I always say that you can learn something in every single situation. You can learn how to do something. You can learn how not to do something. And but as long as you have that kind of approach and that mindset, then I think that will carry you forward. And then when you get into your own situation or you get into the optimal environment where you can really thrive, then it's going to come out in a really good way.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. Brijesh, this has been really awesome, man. Thank you. I know that it's getting late for you, so I'll just leave with one last question. I know you've spent, a while doing this. You've established something really special at Quinnipiac from everything I've heard from a lot of people that I've worked with that previously worked with you. I know you have a big coaching tree out there, especially on the East Coast. And I just wondered if you had any kind of general words of advice for any young strength and conditioning coaches looking to kind of continue to make their mark and push forward and make a career for themselves.
Yeah. Never stop learning. Like that's probably the number one thing. And I think on my own career path, there was a time where I stopped learning because I legitimately thought I knew it all. And then I was sadly mistaken. Like I was 24 years old. I was a full-time strength coach, had a website, like selling products. I was in Perform Better. And then I remember Jeff Oliver and I got invited to go to Mike Boyle's Functional Strength Coach 1 in 2005. And he was talking about Thomas Myers, fascia, anatomy trains, talking about Porterfield and DeRosa, Stuart McGill, like all this stuff. And I'm like, holy shit. Like this guy's like 40-something at that time, 40-something years old. And he's still learning. Like, I have no idea what he's talking about right now. Like, I need to keep learning. And so that kind of got me back in the right track and realized, like, you know what, I don't know it all. And my kind of mission is to really help the people that I've come in contact with and realize that they can become better versions of themselves. And so strength conditioning just happens to be my avenue. So for me to be able to foster that kind of growth, I need to learn myself. And so that's probably the best piece of advice I can give is to never stop learning, and to be able to have an attitude where you never want to stop learning. It's a growth mindset, but really you've got to be humble and realize what you do know and what you don't know, and when I actually just put an Instagram post on this, but like, if you're humble, you'll always find ways to improve. And it's really, it's fighting against complacency, because the moment you get complacent, the moment you think you know it all, the moment you're going to stop learning, the moment your impact is going to slow down. So really just stay humble and always keep learning.
I love that. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate that. I need to hear that just as much as anybody else. So thank you for that. And finally, anything you want to plug? I know you just had put out a new website and everything like that. So where can the people find you? Anything you want to promote, have at it.
Yeah, it's been a labor of love. Like I used to have a website a long time ago, and couldn't keep it up. And so now it's only a week old now. So launched coachbpatel.com. It's kind of like an online kind of portfolio of everything that I've done, like podcasts that I've been on, articles. I'll put some blogs up there to try to deliver some content. And I've got a webinar up there right now, actually on RPR in Aldoa in a team setting. So feel free, you can watch that if you've got 37 minutes of time. But we'll put some other webinars out there too, offer services, consult, help write programs, speak whenever that's available for clinics and things like that. But really, I think that's one thing I've started to get into a little bit more, is it's just really trying to consult. And just like you asked that question about helping young coaches, and obviously this is kind of promoting my services here, but like, I think when you go to a conference, like you can spend $300 to $500 on, learning from the speakers and stuff like that. But in reality, the time that you really learn is when you get to hang out with the speakers, like one-on-one, or like in small groups, like maybe afterwards or at a social. The way I'm starting to look at consulting and helping like other young coaches and other coaches is it's a way to kind of accelerate that growth and that development. Like if, even for you, for this, like we're just talking quadrants for a little bit, like maybe that's a different piece of the different angle that I gave you, and it's just trying to help your growth and help your development and anybody else who's listening to this. But I think that's a big thing that I can kind of offer and help. And I've been in this field for a long time, and I don't ever plan on stop learning, but that's a big thing. And so feel free, check out the website, and then that has all my social handles on there as well.
Maybe I'll tell Sean I'm firing him. I'll bring you on board. So
right, I know. Yeah. He'd love that.
But no, Sean, thank you. We'll go ahead.
Sean wouldn't be there without me.
Yeah.
Well, without my parents, but like he might be slaving away at some newspaper.
Yeah. So funny enough, I was a journalism major as well and did 2 years of radio broadcasting out of school.
No way.
So we have that in common for sure. Maybe it's when you do that, you're just guaranteed to be successful at this.
I know, right?
I don't know. Hey, Brijesh, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate the time, and definitely going to stay in touch with you. That was really informative, and I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man.